All right, its final phase. It begins really, as we've noted, up in New England, with a lot of unrest around, especially Boston, and then moves after the Battle of Bunker Hill, and the British return from Canada to New York, moves more towards the middle colonies down in Philadelphia, New Jersey, and the last phase of the Revolution really kind of moves towards the South. Um, what ends up happening is the British decide to move south because they don't have success in the North. And so they go ahead and make a conscious decision that they're going to go where they have more support, and that's in the southern colonies, where most of the loyalists did in fact live. The Americans during this time, when the British are making this decision, are going through some struggles of their own. Particularly, they spend a pretty harsh winter at a place called Valley Forge, which is just outside of Philadelphia. The winter was particularly hard, and we go into the winter, and it's really looking like Washington's forces once again are demoralized and in danger of just completely disintegrating. And so Washington makes a pretty fateful decision. He decides to go ahead and winter with the troops, with the army there at Valley Forge. This was unusual. Ordinarily, officers in the army in Great Britain or the Americans would not winter with the soldiers. They would leave the soldiers to set up winter camp, the soldiers would stay there, and the officers would go home or would go to other types of lodgings. They would not stay out in the field. If Washington had done that, there's a lot of speculation that, in fact, if he'd come back in the spring, there would not have been an army. But in fact, Washington decides to stay, and he stays with his soldiers there at the Valley Forge. The other reason Valley Forge is extremely important is because prior to the winter of 1778 and 1777, uh, the American Army was really just a group of volunteers who had no particular experience in how to fight using infantry tactics. That changes in Valley Forge as a result of a German who comes over, a guy by the name of Friedrich von Steuben, and he trains the American Army. He trains them in how to fight as a unit, how to fight as an infantry, and this really enables Washington for the first time to confront the British on a large scale on a field of battle. Prior to this, really, the Americans were very ill equipped to go ahead and face the British, and that will come into play here in a little bit, just at the end of the Revolution. So the Americans are going through Valley Forge. The British decide to go ahead and move south. And the reason, again, they move south is for the more colonial support. And this really takes place for the first time in the summer of 1778. Another reason for the change is because the British are now under new command. General Howe is removed, and a new general, General Clinton, goes ahead and takes command of the British Army. And so he goes ahead, moves south, and he goes ahead and is successful with his first major offensive at a place, Savannah, Georgia, and the British take Savannah. Then they spend some time down there in Georgia. In 1780, the British go ahead and take over Charlestown, South Carolina, and Clinton thinks like, okay, things are going pretty well here. I need to get back up to the north where a lot of the troublemakers are, and kind of hold down the fort there, and um, I'll leave my second in command, General Cornwallis, in command here. And again, things seem to be going well. The British have their largest victory at Charlestown. They capture 5,000 rebels, so almost a whole army, and they're feeling pretty good. 1780, more success. Camden falls to the British, but then they falter for the first time in the South. Again, in the year 1780, where the British lose at King's Mountain, and then in 1781 they lose again in a place called Cowpens. Now the British are like, okay, well maybe the South wasn't going to be as easy as we thought it was, and so they get a little nervous, and so Cornwallis, coming into a place called Guilford Courthouse, decides he's going to win no matter what, and in fact he does. Uh, Guilford Courthouse is a British victory, but they incur extremely high casualties, and at this point Cornwallis is thinking, okay, maybe the Southern strategy wasn't such a great idea after all. I need to head back up to New York, our base of operations, and get out of the South because things aren't going well here. And so Cornwallis begins moving north. The plan was that Cornwallis was going to go ahead and rendezvous with the British Navy at a place called Yorktown. Yorktown is up in Virginia. It's just on the Chesapeake, and um, Cornwallis decides He knows that by this point on, Washington's army has moved to the south, is in Virginia, and he knows that all he needs to do is just to get out of there. And so he's arranged this meeting with the British fleet, and so he backs himself into this peninsula at Yorktown. It sounds like this would be a mistake, but in reality, it probably wasn't a bad move at first because peninsulas are incredibly defensible. There's only one direction the enemy can come at you, and so you can train all your guns in that direction, defend yourself pretty effectively against almost any land-based enemy. That assumes that the enemy is completely land-based. What the British didn't know, or what Cornwallis didn't know, is that the Americans had, through the work of Marquis de Lafayette, coordinated with the French Navy. And the French Navy beats the British Navy into the Chesapeake Bay and to the peninsula at Yorktown. And so when Cornwallis all of a sudden backs himself into this peninsula, he sees ships off the coast. They're not British ships. The British Navy can't get through to him to rescue him. So he is now trapped. And once he's trapped, the Americans begin pounding him with their artillery. The French have him surrounded on the sea, and they begin bombarding the coastline with their guns. He's completely cut off, and he does end up having to surrender. And he surrenders the entire British Army to George Washington there at Yorktown. And this is the end of the American Revolution. This is the victory for the Americans and what gains us our freedom.